Hey, this is Dr. Glenn, and I'm here again with the Ryan Levesque. How are you, Ryan?
Good, how are you? It's funny that you said that because I actually own that domain.
Was Ryan Levesque taken?
Unfortunately, it was. It's a relatively uncommon name, but it just so happens that there's another Ryan Levesque who is also an internet marketer out there. So it's kind of funny. It's like in the 80s, they had several different knockoffs of the Ghostbusters, and there was like the real Ghostbusters. So I'm thinking of even just for emphasis, adding the real Ryan Levesque.
I thought it was really funny you told me that you couldn't select your baby's name until you knew that Henry Levesque was available as a domain.
It's funny, but it might sound sad, but it's actually true.
I thought, if you have no objections, that today we could talk about using stepping stones to increase conversions and how most marketers, I think, make their lives a lot harder than it really needs to be because they seriously underestimate how much effort is actually required to make the sale. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think some people, especially when you're kind of new to this whole world of direct response and conversion-focused website design and website build-out, there's a tendency to think that all you need to do is say, hey, I've got this really great product, service, whatever it may be, so step on up and buy.
Right. I know that when people are new, they don't totally understand all the pieces and parts of a well-constructed persuasion argument. But I'm going beyond that. I'm talking about what's the actual offer that you make to people up front. And I think that most marketers at the beginning and actually even as they go along, they ask prospects to take too big a leap.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I do. I think the analogy that's always been super clear in my mind is thinking about courting or relationships. It's the whole idea that you need to shake hands before you hug before you kiss before you ask someone to hop into bed with you, and do all of these things before you ask someone to have kids together. The handshake comes first. And I think there's a tendency to forget that, and sometimes people jump the gun and they go straight for the marriage proposal.
What comes first is, what's your name?
True.
What comes first is slowly approaching the person and not terrifying them that you're a psychopath.
You're right, because even though I broke it down into steps like that, if you come sprinting at someone with your arm outstretched with an angry face, shake my hand, they're going to run in terror. You can even break down every one of those steps in courting or building a relationship with someone. You can even break those steps down further.
It sounds outrageous, and people are saying, well, nobody really comes rushing at someone with their arm outstretched. But when you really observe human behavior and you look at the differences in the way that people approach you, and things as simple as, do they pause to make room for you in their conversation as they're introducing themselves? When do they take their breaths? How close do they stand? How fast do they work towards you? How do they look at you? How do they maintain or not maintain eye contact? All of those things are intimately involved with the initial judgments about, do I trust this person or are they here to hurt me? And if you think about it, especially online today, that judgment, which is built into the evolutionary animal, that judgment is something that people are making all the time.
I think you're right. And I think what's important is people listening to this are saying, well, I don't actually go through that process. Well, you're right. It's something that happens on an unconscious or a subconscious level. We don't actively ask ourselves a series of 35 questions when we first meet someone, like the things that you just went through. It basically amounts to a gut feel that we have, right? You either have a good feeling about someone or a bad feeling about someone. And when you translate that analogy or that metaphor online, the same thing happens. People make a snap decision one way or another. Am I going to trust what this person has to say, at least initially, or am I going to hit the back button?
I think that most marketers unconsciously are doing the equivalent of saying, hey, baby, backseat of my car Saturday night. You know what I mean? What I'm saying is, I think this is all unintentional because as a marketer, you become intimately involved with your own product or service, right?
Right.
And you know exactly how valuable it is. You've been spending months, if not years, putting it together, thinking about how to talk about it, telling your friends about it, genuinely feeling passionate about your product or service, and in most cases, genuinely meaning well, that you've got a good solution to a real problem and you plan to deliver. So from the marketer's perspective, they are perfectly honest. They've got perfect integrity about what they're doing, yet because they're so involved with the product, because they know exactly how valuable it is, they forget the level of skepticism in the market, they forget how much people distrust everyone, especially today online, and they forget the level of indisputable, overwhelming proof that's required to get prospects to part with their money. And as a result, they try to force prospects to take much too big of a leap, and you have the hey baby phenomenon.
It comes down to this. We all have these certain truths in our mind that we take to be self-evident, but your prospect they're not working from those same assumptions. And it's difficult, I think, the ability to empathize with your prospect comes down to being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and ask yourself, going back to before you had that level of familiarity with your product or your market or your industry, what skepticisms did you have? What questions, concerns did you have? And it's extremely difficult to do that. And so one of the ways in which you can do that is to actually interact with your audience. We all have these dreams of having a fully automated system that doesn't involve any human involvement whatsoever. But in order to get there, in my experience, I've found that you first need to get the manual process right before you can automate it. And so what that means is before you can have a list of FAQs that overcome a prospect's objections, you first need to actually get on the phone or talk with your prospects in person and find out what those are and answer them on a one-on-one basis and get a feeling for what those things are.
You need to know what they smell like.
Yeah, exactly. You need to be able to close your eyes and picture, there's another marketer that calls it finding out who your Bob is, and Bob being your avatar. Who is the representative person in your market? And in some ways it's an amalgamation of everyone in your market, but in other ways it's an individual. And you want to be able to understand what clothing does that individual wear. They're wearing a rock band t-shirt. Who's the artist? Does it have holes in the t-shirt? What does their room look like? What do they eat for dinner? All of those things, because it paints a picture and it tells you, is this someone at the end of the day who's maybe highly educated and they are a bookworm and they spend their evenings reading 800-page history tomes? Or are they someone who, they're blue collar, they hit the bar after work, they drink a few beers and they watch sports? Everything around that. And when you can understand who your prospect is at that deep level, then all of a sudden you can relate to them and speak to them in a language that they would naturally use when speaking to you.
Well, and to tie it back to the theme of our talk today, what you're looking for is a series of micro commitments that you can break down your sales process into so that everything is really a no-brainer and doesn't engender that fear response. And I can give you a very specific example by illustrating the way that most psychotherapists and coaches try to market their practice and why most psychotherapists and coaches spend most of their time just therapying and coaching each other as opposed to seeing paying clients. If that's okay with you, Ryan, did you want to go a different direction?
No, I think that's perfect. Going through an example like that will be really helpful. So let's do that.
Here's why, in my experienced opinion, most psychotherapists and coaches don't have a lucrative, fun, paying practice. Believe it or not, the average person really likes screwing up their lives. It's pretty easy to run out, but despite the pain, it's actually a lot easier to run out and act the way you've always acted and keep getting what you've always gotten out of life, as opposed to venturing into dangerous territory and risk changing. Changing is very uncomfortable, unfamiliar, it feels dangerous, and it takes you out of the groove that you're normally in and that you got conditioned to be in for good reasons in your past. If you look at the task of well, really both psychotherapy and coaching, there are some differences between them, but that's not the subject of this audio. If you look at the task of psychotherapy, let's say, we're typically in the business of convincing people to stop doing what feels natural. But not only that, we want them to spend time having uncomfortable conversations about what the alternatives might be. We want them to give us money for having these uncomfortable conversations. We want them to admit they can't fix the problems themselves. We want them to bear the embarrassment of having their family and friends know in many cases. Mm-hmm. We want them to forego reimbursement from the insurance company if they want to make any real progress because the insurance company will hardly pay for anything. And we want them to do all this without any guarantee of results. You never see a psychotherapist say, or your money back. So look at the chasm that a psychotherapy patient has to jump through or a coaching client has to jump through. It's enormous.
Yeah, it is. There's risk in every element that you just walked through right there. There's the promise of monetary loss. There's a promise of, well, in Asian cultures, we would say loss of face when your friends and family know that you're seeing a psychotherapist. I mean, there's risk, social risk, there's financial risk, there's risk in every dimension that you can think of.
Ego risk.
Exactly.
Is it any wonder that psychotherapists don't have a practice, that coaches don't have a lucrative practice? When you look at it like that, you'd have an easier time convincing people to stick their head in the microwave.
Disclaimer, at the end of this call, do not stick your head in the microwave.
Right. Trained marketers on the phone. What most psychotherapists actually do is they stick up their credentials, like look in the Yellow Pages, for example. They just stick up their credentials, say that they accept insurance, and then they wonder why the phone doesn't ring.
Right.
And when I would supervise psychotherapists or coaches on how to grow their practice, I would tell them to create stepping stones, which we could also call micro commitments online, which is taking baby steps to build some type of, Ryan, in your words, action-taking momentum, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So what are the stepping stones, just to bring that example full circle, what are the stepping stones in the psychotherapy example that you recommend?
Well, this is what I typically recommend and that I know for a fact works, but you could even go further if you were having trouble getting this to work. Rather than having people call for a free session, or some psychotherapists don't even offer a free session, rather than trying to get people to call you directly, I would have them to call an automated service for free solutions in informational form first. So I would pick a very specific niche. I wouldn't advertise general psychotherapy services. I would advertise to couples, or I'd advertise to ADHD parents of ADHD children. Mm-hmm. And I would have an automated answering service that they could leave their name and number on to get a free report all about, the 7 solutions for constructive communication in couples, 3 ways to quickly overcome the devastation of an affair, whatever their therapist's particular specialty was. The key is that by having them call an automated service rather than having them call you directly or even your answering machine knowing that you would call back, is that you're removing the need for them to commit to personal contact. Now they're just calling for a report, and they're not going to have to get on the phone with you and have that personal interaction where they're admitting that they need help.
It's far less threatening. And there's also no potential sales pressure. They know that if they get on the phone with you and speak to another human being, that there's the possibility that they might say, when would you like to schedule your first appointment? And that is uncomfortable for most people.
And the research on this indicates an approximately 3 times bump, like a 300% bump on first phone calls when you advertise an automated service as opposed to a direct consultation.
Right. So you get more people coming through the door, more people that have an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better through your report or through your automated message or CD, whatever it is that you might give away. And then from there, they build a little bit more comfort level, right?
Yep.
So that's the equivalent of maybe having coffee with someone before going out to dinner and a movie. Or even seeing a personal ad or a YouTube video of who they are after you Google them to realize, okay, this person's not a serial killer. They seem like a normal human being.
More like that, yes, before you even give your phone number. Right?
Yeah.
Online, there are versions of this. I actually have a 2-step opt-in process. I ask people to click before they opt in, and I find that I do better with that as compared to asking for the opt-in directly because there's less trust involved in obtaining a click than there is in an opt-in.
Right.
And then, of course, once you have that contact, you can deliver repeated valuable solutions in informational format. A lot of this is the basics of direct response, and people might be saying that they're doing this already, but most coaches don't. And it's a good opportunity while you're listening to this to think through how could you break up your system even further. And here's the part that coaches mess up once they do get the phone call. So let's say that you do this part right, and you set up a series of stepping stones or micro commitments, and people get the free reports and the information you're sending them, and they decide they're going to call you for a free session. What usually happens is that the coach will try to get them to come in right away for the free session, as opposed to talking to them for 15 or 20 minutes on the phone to try and form a bond, find out a little bit more about what they want to accomplish, what the problem is, what their experience has been in the past with previous coaches or psychotherapists, what they're expecting, any concerns that they have about coming in, where they live, are they worried about the drive in any way, do they have any insurance concerns. Having that conversation over the telephone, that free conversation as a stepping stone before you have the actual free session is something that most coaches and consultants and psychotherapists don't ever think about. That will multiply your response dramatically as well.
And what you're saying is that'll improve the stick rate among people who might otherwise cancel or be no-shows. They're actually going to follow through with the appointment?
That will improve the show rate, yes.
Okay.
It also improves the stick rate for the sessions because, you see, if you purvey the sense that no experience with you will be dangerous and that you are hypersensitive to the chasms that these clients have to jump over, then their experience with you from the get-go is almost effortless. And why wouldn't they want more at some point when they get some momentum going?
Most people listening to this call right now are probably wondering, well, how does this relate to my online business, or how can I apply what we're talking about in an online environment? And I think this example walks through a one-to-one relationship that you might have if you're doing one-on-one selling. right? Whether that's in a psychotherapy business or if you're a one-on-one salesperson selling local SEO services to local brick and mortar businesses, it doesn't really matter. This is a one-on-one sort of sales process. But you can actually map this online. And I'm going to give just one example of how you might be able to do this. In your example, Glenn, you talked about the importance of asking the prospect in this case, just to sort of use a generic term, the prospect in this case, a set of questions to find out who they are, what's their past experience been like, what concerns, objections, and questions do they have before even working together with them. You can replicate that process to a large extent online by installing these tiny little surveys prior to asking someone to take some sort of commitment on your site. So rather than directly going on your site and asking someone to opt in exchange for a free report, or asking them to purchase something via a sales letter or a video sales letter or some sales material, you can insert this intermediate step of asking them a few questions via survey. For example, you might say, listen, if you're anything like me, I know you're busy and I don't want to waste your time. So tell me, which of the following is the biggest challenge that you're having in your life right now about topic XYZ? Is it A, B, or C? By getting them to take that step, it's sort of that non-threatening stepping stone prior to asking them to make a larger commitment.
Ryan, the highest double opt-in rate I ever got, which was 28%, and if anybody tries to acquire double opt-ins from paid traffic I was talking about in a pay-per-click environment, that's just outrageous. It's really high. That's at least double what most people get, was from a, I think, 42-question survey that I put up. What happened was I advertised a personally customized solution in a report format to a fairly serious problem that people had. And I took a lot of time to do the kind of hand-holding and direct speaking with the market that you were talking about before. And as a consequence, the questions that I asked them made them feel like I really understood them before I asked for any commitment whatsoever in terms of their trust. I mean, I did ask them to click and to spend a little bit of time taking the survey, but before I asked for their opt-in, I proved to them that I thoroughly understood them. And I've had people tell me that they felt better even before they pushed the opt-in button because of what the questions made them think about and what they perceived the author of the questions must know about their problem by having been able to write those questions in the first place. These are all micro-commitments that are done before the opt-in, and then once they opted in, they were so committed that I got twice the normal confirmation rate. I think that just underscores the technique you're talking about, where you can use a survey if you take the time to really understand the market so you can portray empathy in the survey itself. Yeah, I mean, and you can even use one-on-one, very personal language that articulates that. You say, listen, I've talked to a lot of people that are in different situations, and most of the people tell me that they're facing one of the following problems. Boom, boom, boom. If one of those problems is something that your prospect is facing, what they're going to say is, wow, you really understand me. And so it's this leading indicator right off the bat that tells your prospect that, hey, I'm someone who knows this market. I'm someone that you can trust to work with. Not only that, I don't treat everybody like cattle. I know that you're different than everyone else at this site, and I'm trying to determine exactly how different you are so I can give you a truly unique solution. Right. And now, someone listening to this might say, okay, this is all fine and good, but it sounds like it's a lot of work. Now, there is a way that you can do the 80-20 version of it. You don't need to speak to every segment in your market. You can take the top 3 segments of your market and sort of approximate that one-on-one sales experience that you're trying to replicate. You can approximate it rather than try to recreate it exactly. And you're still going to get a tremendous boost in response. And the reason why is because there's so few people online that do this. Even ask yourself as a consumer, how seldom does it happen that when you visit someone's website, they ask you these sort of thoughtful questions? Most of the time what they're doing is they're just raising their hand saying, guess what, my solution is the best, and they're trying to almost shout over you, and you're mentally having this conversation in your head that's, well, time out a second, what about this? And they're just shoving their sales message down your throat without even giving you a chance to interact. Yep, exactly. Let's use an online example where my wife was selling coaching for emotional binge eating. Okay. Let's say we get to the point that someone is actually requesting a free session. Here's something that most doctors will do at the end of a free session that I think is a mistake, is they'll say, well, how are Tuesdays at 8 o'clock? Will that work for you? And they try to put them into this regular relationship right away. What have they done? they've said, okay, I'm making the assumption that you are ready to commit to treatment with me over the long term and this open-ended experience that's going to cost you time and money and make you continue to face all of the things that made it so hard to get here in the first place.
Right.
As opposed to saying, I might be able to schedule a consultation with you, a follow-up 2 weeks from Friday. Do you think that might work for you? Why don't we schedule that tentatively and we can check in with each other that week to make sure it still works? Sometimes clients are really ready to go and you don't have to do that. You can use your judgment. But at every step, it's possible to break the risk down even further so that people just have one simple stepping stone that seems like a no-brainer.
Right. It's a subtle linguistic distinction, but it's the equivalent of asking someone to go steady with you rather than ask for a second date.
Yes. And here's how Sharon does that in the emotional food binging market. What she does is first, she doesn't even try to sell the session. She really tries harder to sell a CD package. So she's got a series of 8 CDs that talk about all the different elements of emotional eating and how you overcome the problem. Then when people buy that, they're taken to a one-click upsell, which is called the Emotional Eating Quick Start Package. He said, now this is a package that has a defined set of benefits and a defined ending point, and the shorter the better so that you can deliver specific results in a very short period of time. So I just want to read to you the copy on that upsell so you understand what we're talking about. She'll say, finally make progress against emotional binge eating. Your personal quick start is 3 supercharged sessions with no ongoing commitments customized exactly to your needs. These are 3 very special sessions designed to install new patterns so you can change direction and get back on track quickly. In session number 1, we'll assess your cravings, your personal triggers, and your history of troublesome food thoughts. We'll also review the feeding your soul process for killing your cravings to be sure you know what to do in the moment trouble hits. In session number 2, we'll go into detail about your actual food habits and develop a set of satisfying alternatives and substitutes. In session number 3, we'll tie it all together by assessing your food personality and developing several power phrases and anchor images that stick in your brain when the cravings hit. My customary coaching fee is $200 per session, but with your order today, you can get the 3-session quick start for $200 total. That's 1/3 my normal rate. So again, that's 3 sessions, personally customized to install new thoughts and behavior and begin putting an end to your binge eating for only $200 and no ongoing commitments. You see how that's different than saying how are Tuesdays at 8 o'clock for you? Because not only does this have a very defined end, but it's also very clear exactly what's going to happen in the sessions themselves with a very specific set of benefits. When prospects are put into open-ended situations, it's like putting them in a room in the dark and all of your fears are engendered. But when you turn the lights on and you tell them exactly what's going to happen in every one of those sessions, now they're no longer in the dark and those monsters are no longer running around in their heads. So
it's all about setting expectations.
It really is.
This has been measured. If you put people in a long line and they have no idea how long the line is, if it's 45 minutes, an hour, the level of anxiety and tension is extremely high. All you need to do is put a simple clock that says, your estimated wait time at this point is 35 minutes. It doesn't change the wait time at all, but all it does is it sets expectations.
Interesting.
And it reduces anxiety levels tremendously. If you think about that in terms of your own marketing, that's the key piece here. Is you want to have a defined start point and end point. You want to tell people exactly what to expect. An example online is when you're explaining in your sales letter or in your video sales letter how to complete the checkout process. Most people say all you need to do is order the course and it'll be delivered to you instantly. But what we're saying here is break that down further. Manage people's expectations even further. All you need to do is click on the big yellow button below. When you do that, you're going to be redirected to a screen that looks like this. Show screenshot. Then go through each of the 5 fields, define number, and fill them out one by one. The process takes about 30 seconds. Once you've done that, you'll be redirected to a download page that looks like this, which will give you your link to your product. And by the way, if for any reason anything happens out of the ordinary, all you need to do is call this number below, 1-800-whatever, and my assistant will help you out. See the difference between going through that versus just order my product now. That's the type of baby steps that we're talking about, even within your copy. And I think when it comes to the point that you were bringing up, which is managing expectations, most people, the chasm there is too big. They take it for granted that people are going to be able to figure things out that are intuitive or self-evident, but in many cases, again, because your prospects are not as familiar with your solution, with your website, with your sales process as you are, that sales process can break down. So the answer is to walk people through, hold their hand, and literally walk on each stepping stone side by side with them.
I love the way you described it.
There are 2 things that I was hoping we might cover quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the first one is the importance of eliminating the fear of loss at every single stepping stone. Eliminating the fear of loss. It's human nature to have a much greater fear of losing something than the proportional gain that one would achieve by earning that same prize. So, for example, it's much more painful to lose $50 in your pocket than it is pleasurable to find $50 on the sidewalk.
Yep.
Knowing that element of human psychology, when you think about your marketing, it's absolutely critical that you eliminate the fear of loss at every single stage. So, when you ask someone for the opt-in, you need to be stating, we have a privacy policy is often not enough. You might need to put that in plain language and say, listen, I hate spam just as much as the next guy. And here's my promise to you. If you get one email that you think is spam from me, here's my personal address. Come to my house, knock on my door, and scream in my face, because that's how much I hate spam, right? You might not need to get that overboard. My point is, you want to eliminate that fear of loss, the fear of having to deal with spam or having your email address sold. If you run a shopping site, it might literally be as simple as enjoy our hassle-free shopping experience. Just inserting the words hassle-free might be enough to eliminate the fear of loss, which in that case would be a shopping experience that's full of hassle. We know about guarantees. We know about 60-day, 90-day, 100% money-back guarantees, so I'm not going to really get into guarantees. But you basically want to offer a sort of guarantee at every stage in your sales funnel that eliminates that fear of loss, both monetary loss, both loss of time. People do not want to waste time. You need to prove to them that they're not going to be wasting or losing time by spending time on your website, that they're going to be gaining something. And so you want to articulate that in the language that you use and basically reassure someone literally at every stepping stone in your sales process.
There has to have a reason to read every single sentence, right?
Exactly. It's almost like you're telling people information, and interspersed within the information that you're telling people, you constantly need to reassure them and remind them why it's important that they listen to whatever it is that you're putting in front of them. The counterexample is the psychotherapist that just has a website that's the equivalent of a business card with Joe Smith, PhD, with a big photo of them. You want to say, why is it important that you only work with licensed psychotherapists that have a doctoral degree in such and such a discipline, and why they need to make sure that it's from an accredited university like the university that they achieved their doctorate from. So you want to explain at every step of the way, because you can't take that for granted. People won't see that as being self-evident.
The truth is, in the psychotherapy world, out of over 1,000 patients that I saw, there was only one that asked to see my diploma or even wanted to know what university I came from. They're so involved with their own problem at the moment that they need to know more that you have experience with a specific problem and that you're making them a specific promise.
Right. So in that case, so that would be the example there.
I know that you also have a unique perspective on the neurophysiology of why microcommitments work.
Yeah, and that's really the last thing that I wanted to talk about is this is more than just theory. There's actually something going on in your prospect's brain when they're visiting your website, and it's important to understand that, because when you can understand the reaction that your prospect's brain is having, you can address that. And so specifically, when we get back, we've been talking about the idea of instituting stepping stones to bridge the chasm that occurs whenever you ask someone to either make a commitment or make some sort of change. The reason why that's important is because whenever you ask a prospect or any person to make a change, whether that's a positive change, like starting to attend therapy and to, work through their problems, or a negative change or potentially harmful change, the brain perceives that change as a threat. That's why people tend to have this weird reaction towards earning more money or becoming more successful, is because that change is scary at a very deep, primitive, lizard brain level in your prospect's brain. The structure in your brain that is affected is called the amygdala. It's a structure in your brainstem. It's one of the older parts of our human brain. And basically, that's the structure in your brain that controls the fight or flight response. And when we talk about the fight or flight response, we really should describe it as the fight, flight, or freeze response. Because there's a third reaction that can occur when your brain...
That's interesting. Most people don't talk about that. You're right.
It's the deer in the headlights thing. You can run, you can fight, or you can stand there and say, duh. And honestly, that is one of the main reasons why sales processes break down. Because either you've done something to scare your prospect off, or you've caused them to freeze, usually because there's something on your site or in the language that you've used that confuses them. They don't quite understand, or you've elicited cause for pause. The key is this. Whenever you set off that fight, flight, or freeze response in your prospect's brain. It's like the alarm bells go off, primitive brain takes over, and you actually elicit a physiological response where you got the butterflies in your stomach, the heart rate, and that whole fight or flight response that's no different than when we were cavemen fighting off predators on the Serengeti. So the key to eliminating that fear of change is to break down the steps, to break down the change that you're asking your prospect to make into a smaller change that flies under the radar.
Jumping over a raging river is pretty scary, but hopping over a little puddle is no big deal.
Exactly. And so that's the key, is you need to break down the change into small enough steps that the change is so small, it's almost imperceptible to the client.
The other benefit, especially online, of breaking a sales process down to very small pieces is that you're able to measure the small steps in the front of the process with more accuracy. Like if you're only getting 5 sales out of 1,000 or something like that, or 5 sales out of 10,000, even worse, if you break it up into 10 steps, you might be getting 400 of the first steps out of 1,000 and, 50 of the second steps. And so you have a statistically viable number of actions to work with, whereas you're never going to be able to do any kind of split testing on the sales because it'll take you a year to complete one test. So when your sales process isn't working, if you break it down into pieces, you have the ability to test and track until you make it work, whereas you don't if you try to look at the whole thing at once.
Right, exactly. And once you've done that, if you find out it's step 6 in your 10-step process, that's where people are falling off, well, maybe you're asking your prospects to take too big of a jump between step 5 and 6. The stepping stones are literally too far apart. So you need to institute a midpoint there to bridge that gap.
Very cool. Well, is there anything else I should have asked you about micro commitments and stepping stones?
I think that covers it for today.
Yeah, baby.
Very good. We'll talk soon.
In just 12 weeks, you can become a certified professional coach, confident in your ability and fully equipped to grow a thriving practice from anywhere or your money back. My name is Dr. Glenn Livingston, and I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about taking your coaching dreams a lot more seriously, about getting the right certification and training, and about developing the confidence to deliver stellar results time after time so your clients will accomplish their goals, others will notice, and get referred back to you. I'll hope you forgive my modesty while we talk, because my wife and I have more combined experience in both coaching and business development than virtually any other program on the market. I've personally worked with over 1,000 clients and supervised dozens of coaches and therapists. Sharon's done literally thousands of groups and team-building workshops. And together we've sold more than $20 million in consulting. We've had our previous work, research, and theories covered in major media like the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Sun-Times, ABC and CBS Radio, the Wall Street Journal, New York Daily News, and many more. So we have the confidence in our ability to train and certify you as a coach and give you the know-how to build the practice of your dreams. In fact, we're so confident, we're willing to guarantee it right through the end of the very last class. If you don't feel our training was your best choice for any reason, just show us you attended at least 3/4 of the classes and did at least 75% of the assignments. We will refund every penny that you paid. When you compare our experience, guarantee, and more affordable than most pricing, we think your choice will be clear. But if you're like most coaches, you're probably a little skeptical, maybe a lot. You see a lot of limitations and obstacles, and I'd like to talk about them with you because most of them are self-imposed. For example, you might think it's not really possible to earn a living as a professional coach. Maybe you think there's too much competition. But did you know that as of this recording, there were only about 20,000 active coaches in North America? That's less than one coach for every 15,000 people. Of course, not every one of those 15,000 people is in the market for a coach, but coaching has become ever more acceptable and interesting thanks to reality shows like The Biggest Loser, The Voice, dancing shows, singing shows, et cetera, et cetera. Every one of the contestants gets a coach, and the audience gets to see the value firsthand as they progress. More importantly, most coaches ignore the immense value of niching. There's literally hundreds of coaching niches to choose from, and when you do niche, you dramatically lower your competition and raise your odds of success. For example, where there may be 20,000 active coaches overall in North America, how many adoption coaches do you think there are? What about coaches who specialize in chocolate addiction? By the way, I could use one of those. Family business, academic achievement, and you don't have to marry any of these niches either. You just try one on size, learn the skills, and transfer them to whatever suits your fancy later on. But here's another self-imposed limitation. Many people think it's simply not possible to earn a living as a coach.
Well, you can visit becomearealcoach.com
to see detailed studies which suggest the average active coach earns about $55,000 per year. Of course, there are coaches who make a lot more and coaches who make a lot less. And it would be unreasonable to assume just getting certified will automatically give you this income. Your income as a coach will depend upon many things, including the niche you choose. For example, working with affluent couples to help them adopt is likely to be more lucrative and helping disabled veterans adjust to life at home. Not any more meaningful, fulfilling, or soulful, but definitely more profitable. The environment you work in will also influence your income. Private practice versus a salaried employee, etc. The number of hours you choose to fill. Nobody says you have to work full time. The fees that you're comfortable charging. There's a lot of coaches out there that don't want to charge as much as they really could charge. The business model that you choose, in other words, individual coaching versus selling books, tapes, seminars, groups, and events for more leveraged and passive income. The seriousness of the problem that you specialize in. How desperate are your clients to solve it? How meaningful and valuable is the solution? For example, it's easier to earn more as an adoption coach than a yoga coach for this very reason. And your income also depends upon how much effort you put into attracting clients. But most importantly, in our experience, your income is related to your coaching confidence and ability to produce stellar results for your clients. Or maybe the obstacle stopping you from taking your coaching dreams to the next level is wondering whether you need a professional background in therapy or counseling. But you don't, because coaching isn't therapy. So you won't get involved in diagnosing, treating, or curing any type of mental illness. And we'll teach you how to clearly draw the line and skillfully refer clients who require a licensed professional. When in doubt, refer it out is our motto. Coincidentally, many of these professionals who you refer to can become a good resource of referrals back into your network. Maybe you're not sure if you're worthy of coaching. Maybe you think you don't have enough experience, or you're just not credible enough to coach people professionally, or that you don't have the expertise. When people tell me this, I tell them that they're asking the wrong question. See, if you're willing to put your heart and soul into helping someone, if you're willing to give them your undivided attention on a regular or semi-regular basis until they reach their goal, if you're willing to make them a priority in your life in exchange for a reasonable payment, then the real question is, you should be asking, are these clients worthy of me? Because you see, you've only got a limited amount of time, energy, and love to give these people, so you've got to protect your practice. The real question is, are they worthy of you? Maybe you don't think you have the time to become a certified professional coach, but if you can make 4 or 5 hours a week, which is under an hour a day, for just a few months, you can definitely become a certified professional coach in our program. And there are many, many ways to start a coaching practice on a part-time schedule. We know most coaches have very busy lives even before they begin. And because we actually like coaches who are out there living real lives, we work hard to accommodate them. Coaching is more about experience and the desire to share and spare than it is about book knowledge. Maybe you think you can't afford it. But our program is much more affordable than most other live interactive certification programs, and we've got financing options to suit any budget. Besides, coaching is one of the least expensive businesses to start because you can work with people all over the world via telephone, Skype, and the internet. So there's really no need for office space, rent, or other overhead. And we'll show you how to make a safe transition plan so you can carefully plan your move from another job with a great deal of confidence when the time is right. Because you are the product. This is another reason why coaching is easier to get into and less expensive, because you are the product. Many of the traditional costs associated with starting a business, like inventory or research and development, production cost, they just simply disappear. So, at the risk of appearing self-serving, a better question than, can you really afford to do this, is, can you really afford not to do it? Finally, perhaps you think you're going to be a great coach, but you're too allergic to marketing to do anything about it. And if you feel this way, it's likely because you've been taught the wrong things about marketing. You're probably thinking of used car salesmen, cold calling, constant rejection, and constant lies. And nobody's taken the time to find out what marketing methods really suit your personality. Remember, Sharon and I have more combined experience in both coaching and business development than virtually any other certification program on the market. That means we've got the flexibility to help virtually any coach who wants it bad enough. You can check out our website at becomearealcoach.com for more details about our personal biographies. But for now, just trust me when I say, if you don't like public speaking, there's no problem. If you hate making cold calls, there's no problem. If you can't even stand the idea of making a website, there's no problem, because we'll show you how to market in a way that's comfortable for you. Now, by this point, you may actually be wondering what happens in the certification program itself. Again, you can visit becomearealcoach.com to read the details, but in a nutshell, our program is largely about the experience of being a coach and not the academic. Each week, you'll meet live with your instructor and your peers and have the experience of practicing that week's coaching or business development lesson with everybody in the group. You'll get detailed feedback from your master coach instructor, and you'll get additional feedback from your peers. And here's an important benefit most people don't think of. You'll get a chance to observe and learn from the other coaches in training. Then, after each event, you'll download a brief set of materials which prepare you for the following week and include an action challenge. So in short, first you practice with your peers, then you watch, read, or listen to us describe what you just experienced, and finally you do it on your own outside of class so you can integrate the learning. Practice, study, then do. It's really that simple in less than an hour a day. There's quite a bit more to know, so you'll want to visit becomearealcoach.com as soon as you can. But the most important thing to remember is that in just 12 weeks, you really can become a certified professional coach, confident in your ability, and fully equipped to grow a thriving practice from anywhere or your money back. Head on over to becomearealcoach.com now. Classes fill quickly, so please book your slot today if you're at all interested. Thanks.